But if every time you get paid, Uncle Sam takes some of it, right? And then the bills are knocking on your door, the bank is lined up for your car, for your house, and for everything else, then you cannot save for the future. As I've told you last time, about 50% of people ages 60 and over cannot retire because they don't have any savings. And the way to change that is to make sure you start to think differently. And the third principle is to invest into your future. So that's what we're going to talk about. Now, I need to give you a bit of disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a financial advisor. That's not what I do for a living. All right? What I'm sharing with you is what my wife and I came up with after we first got married and had a lot of debt and struggled with finance, and we decided to change the way we think about money. So we took some classes. We did the Financial Peace University with Dave Ramsey was one of them, and we came up with our own 10 steps based on that. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you, okay? So this is not financial advice. If you need financial advice, you have to go to a financial advisor. This is just me sharing with you what we've done. So as I said, so this is a good book to invest $13 in. It's called The Complete Guide to Money by Dave Ramsey. This would be a good investment. So we're going to cover a few of the things he covers in the book, but not all of them. But again, just the ones that we came up with based on our own plan. I'm sorry, did you want to take a picture of it? Yeah, it's The Complete Guide to Money by Dave Ramsey. It's about $13 on Amazon. All right? Okay, so we came up with 10 steps, right? We're going to review them. Anybody remember what the first step was? Return a tithe and offering. I think this is the biggest mistake Christians make. I do not understand Christians who don't give tithe and offering. It just doesn't make sense. God says challenging me. That's the only place where God invites you to challenge him and test him. And he says, see if I won't open the windows of heaven and bless you so much you get sick of me blessing you. Those people on the screen, William Colgate, Henry Hines, Colgate toothpaste, Heinz ketchup, Jell-O for Kraft, those guys tithed. They started out with 10%. By the time they died, they gave more money than they kept because tithing works. So the first principle, if you don't do anything else, I'll tell you, anything else of the 10 steps, make sure you do this one. 10% tithe, 5% offerings. All right? The second step, before you try and get out of debt, you need an emergency fund. And the reason is because emergencies will happen. The car will break down. Something will break in the house. The kids will need braces. I don't know. But you need to make sure you have some money saved so you don't get derailed when an emergency happens. And the $1,000, and the reason is most small emergencies can be handled with $1,000. The third is create a budget. So we're going to spend a bit more time on that one today. As Pastor Maxwell says, a budget is people telling their money what to do instead of wondering where it went. All right? So create a budget. So when you create a budget, you start with your income. All right? First thing you do is, what are all the monies you have coming in? That's your salary, bonuses, interests from your bank, or if you're doing Uber, for example, child support, if you're renting your house, Social Security, pension, disability, everything, write it down, how much money you're bringing in. You start with your income. And we talked about the 5 essentials of budgeting. The first one is food. Before you pay for anything else, make sure you have food to eat and to feed your kids. Number 1. Number 2 is shelter. Pay for the house. You don't want to end up on the streets. All right? After you can eat so you don't die, the next thing is make sure you have a place to sleep. Third is the utilities. Keep the lights on. Pay for the phone bill. Fourth is the car. If you have a job, you need to get there. Make sure you pay for the car. And the last one is clothing. Now, this one is tricky because some people, the ladies, love to shop. And they just shop. That doesn't mean shop till you drop. What it means is make sure you have some decent clothes to put on. All right? Okay. So now once you have identified your your incomes, now identify your expenses. And always start with giving, tithes and offering. If you're supporting charities, identify that too. And then food, savings, emergency savings, retirement savings, housing and utilities, transportation, car payments, capture all those things, clothing, and then health savings. I can share the presentation later if you guys want to look at them later. Personal, like life insurance, childcare. Make sure every single thing that you're spending money on ends up in your budget. Because if you don't, then your budget won't work and you'll get frustrated and you'll quit. But you have to make sure, and it takes time. It took us a good 1.5 to 2 years to really nail down our budget. All right, so make sure you capture everything. If you have debts, make sure you capture those. All right? And again, debt comes after the 5 other things are taken care of. All right, now this is generally what's recommended as percentages on your budget. So tithe and offering, we talked about 15%. That's 10% tithe, 5% offering. Savings will be 5 to 10%. Housing typically is between 25 and 35%. So your rent, your home insurance, that's what that includes. Utilities, food, transportation. So there's a certain percentage there. Now that depends on your income. If you make $50,000 or $70,000, then maybe that range. But if you make $200,000, that doesn't mean you should still put 35% of it towards your house. Okay? That's general. It's a rule, but sometimes there are exceptions to the rule. All right, so I'm going to share with you a simple budget to teach you how to make a budget. Let's say we have this couple. Rob Smith is an engineer. He makes $78,000 a year. His wife is Susie, secretary, $48,000. So together, the total income per year is $126,000. All right? And they have a monthly net pay of $7,958.54. Okay? And they own a home. They have 2 cars. They're in debt. They have 2 kids. And that's their monthly income there. So what would their budget look like? Well, first, as I said, you start with your income. So gross pay for Rob is $3,250 every 2 weeks. And gross pay for Susie is $1,846 every 2 weeks. So you capture that in your budget, what your gross pay is, and you also capture the net pay. You want to make sure, can you see this? It's a little bit hard to see. It's a little bit small, but you get the idea, right? Once you've got your income down, then you start with giving. So tithe and offering, 15% of $3,250 comes out to $397.93. So every time they get paid, the first thing they take out is the tithe and offering and return that to the church. All right? Now let's go now. So you got your savings now. If you have, your employer has a 401k, listen to this. If your employer offers a 401k, make sure you put at least the amount that they match. Does that make sense? Do you understand what that means? Your employer will help you save for your future. Some employers will match 5%, or maybe not 5, 3.5%, 3%, 2%. Never put less than what they match, because then you leave money on the table. By the time you retire, there may not be Social Security. What you're going to have is what you have in your 401k. So make sure you always put at least what your employer will match. And then savings, try to put some money aside for a rainy day. Okay? Recommended is 10%. And then put aside money for food, and we'll talk a little bit more about the food later. Transportation, utilities, capture all that. I'm going to go through this quickly. And then by the time you're done, when you spend everything every month, the balance should be 0. Okay? It's recommended that you have what is called a zero-sum budget. That means everything that comes in against everything that goes out, when you're done with it, the balance on your budget should be 0. Is that making sense? All right. We're good so far. Okay. All right. Now, there's some things in your budget that you don't just pay once, right? You pay for them multiple times. It's recommended that you use the envelope system and you use cash. Let me explain to you why that is. If you get paid, and every time you get paid, you want to swipe the card to buy food. Something's going to happen at some point. You'll run out of money in the budget, but you still feel like going out to eat. So you swipe the card and you go over budget. So it's recommended if your budget for food is $250 every time you get paid, you put it in an envelope and you use cash. Every time you go somewhere to pay for food, you pay with cash. Once you run out of money, you can't go out to eat anymore. Eat at home. Does that make sense? Because otherwise, you cannot. So food, gas, the ladies who like to shop, clothing, put those on cash. My wife and I have been doing this for a long time. We used to have trouble in the beginning. Because, when you swipe, you're not paying attention. That happens to me too. But since we start using cash, once you run out of money, we'd like to go out to eat. It'd be nice, but sorry, no date tonight. We'll have to wait until we get paid again. That helps you to build discipline. Also, when you do your budget, save for things that are not regular expenses. For example, vacation. If you plan to go on vacation, save for it. Let's say, for example, in October, you want to spend $3,000 for vacation in October. So you take $3,000, if you get paid every week, you divide it by 18, because you're going to get paid 18 times, and then you raise that money. Every time you get paid, you put a little bit aside. So when October comes, you can take that $3,000 and go on vacation. Instead of just waking up in October and say, let's go on vacation, and you spend your housing money. And now you're struggling. Save for things that are irregular. So that would be vacation, taxes, birthdays if you want to celebrate them, life insurance, car expenses. Put all those things, save for them little by little until the time you have to make the expense. All right? So some of the stuff you can do for budgeting, there's a few apps called Every Dollar. You can download that for free. There is Google Sheets. There are a lot of things out there you can do to create a good budget. And if you're interested, I can share with you a template that I have too, anybody who's interested. But make sure you have a budget, all right? Because a budget helps you to build discipline about your money. All right, so step number 4, pay off your debts. So last time I was here, I told you some principles to avoid debt. I told you, never co-sign a debt for anybody. Remember that? Not even your kids. No family. Because once you have a debt with somebody, the relationship changes. You're no longer father and son or brother and sister. Now it's master and slave. All right? Never co-sign. Never loan or borrow money from anybody. And then never use credit for anything except your house. You should not use credit for a car. You should never buy a car on credit. Never. You should only buy a car if you can afford to pay for it. Let's say I want that 2024 Lexus ES250. If I'm going to buy that, I need to be able to go to the dealership and write a check. If I can't do it, I'll get a Honda. But pay cash. Why? Because what you're going to do is get yourself into a relationship with the bank where it's not your car. It's the bank's car. You know what happens if you stop paying? They take the car. It's not your car. So what you do instead is you save. Now, after you save some money and you get to a point where you're financially secure, trust me, you won't want a Lexus. You'll want a Maserati. And you'll be able to write a check for $300,000 and pay for it. But that requires discipline. You have to wait and save and invest so you can get there. We'll talk about that in a minute. So if you want to buy a car in 3 years and the car costs $10,000, what you do is you divide 10,000 by 3, and then you divide the 3,300 by 12 months, and then you save that every time you get paid. When the 3 years come, you take the $10,000, you buy a car. All right? That's the way you should be, because otherwise, we live in a culture where everybody buys everything on debts. Everything, and you can't even sleep at night. Every time you get paid, it's gone. I've been there. I told you last time. Sometimes I was getting paid once a month. I would get paid, and 3 days later, I was broke and still had to wait 27 days. You know how long 27 days are when you're broke? Wait to get paid again. You don't want to have to deal with that. Credit cards. No credit cards. Cut them off. Thank you, brother. Dave Ramsey said, have a plastectomy. Take out the credit card, take a scissor, and cut it off. No credit cards. Don't listen to the hype that credit cards are cool. No, they're not. They're dumb. Debt is dumb. You don't want them. Now, we all know that having a house is what? The American dream, isn't it? Now, a house is a good thing to have. It's very good to have a house because it's generational wealth. You can pass that on to your kids. And most people in the United States who build wealth, they do it through the house. But the American dream can become the American nightmare if you do it wrong. The recommendation is, if you buy in a house, if you cannot afford to buy it cash, you can take a loan, but do not take more than a 15-year loan. Are you listening? You don't want to be old and now, 30 years later, you're still paying for a house. And your monthly payment for your house should be about 25% of your income. In other words, if you're making $50,000 a year, don't buy $1 million house. Now, let me show you why. Let's say you buy a $225,000 home with a loan of 6% interest. At the end of 30 years, you would pay $485,000 for that house. That $225,000 house, you pay $485,000. But if you have for 15 years, you end up paying $341,000 and you save $144,000. If you're going to buy a home, take a 15-year mortgage. Now, it's going to be painful, right? The payment's going to be bigger. But after 15 years, you look at this house, and now you have no mortgage, all right? Now, let's talk about how to get out of debt. The concept is called the debt snowball. Debt snowball. Here's how it works. We're going to use Susie again and Rob as an example. Let's say they have these debts. They have a timeshare, they have a car, they have credit cards, and they have college loans they want to pay for. So the debt snowball, what you do is you list all your debt beginning with the smallest one. You put the smallest one and go down to the biggest one, and you put the balance and the minimum payment. The idea of the debt snowball is you start with the smallest debt first. You pay the minimum payment on everything else, and then all the money you got, you put it towards the smallest debt. Okay? So you would start, in this case, Rob and Susie would start with the Macy's debt. They owe $585, and the monthly payment is $29.87. Now, if you need to get out of debt, you need to look for ways to get more cash. All right? So how do you get more cash? Look at your budget. If the things that you're paying for, you don't need, get rid of them. For example, cable. Why do you need cable? You don't need cable. Some people are paying $250 a month for cable, and then they're in debts. You can get it later, but for now, get rid of it. Netflix and HBO Max, and I guess it's Max now. Get rid of them, right? Find ways, or you can sell stuff on eBay. Sell stuff on Amazon. Rent your house if you have to, or sell it and get a smaller house. Figure out ways to get more cash to come in. Dave Ramsey says you sell so much stuff, the kids will think they're next. If you have extra stuff in your house, sell them so you can get extra money, and you put that extra money towards your smallest debt. So in this example, Susie and Rob sell some stuff and are able to put $225 towards the debt, extra, so they pay it off. Now, after they pay it off, they take the money they saved from the first debt and they put it towards the second. So the $312 they were paying for Macy's, they added to the $58 that they had for Visa, and now it increases the monthly payment. So you do this for Visa. When you pay it off, take that extra cash, put it to the next debt, and you do that until you're done. I'm speaking from experience. That's what we did. And that's how you get yourself out of debt, using the debt snowball. And after you've done all this, you got free cash. All this money now you are putting towards paying for debt, guess what happens? You can take that money and put it towards the house or put it towards the next step. Does that make sense? Okay, so debt snowball, use the debt snowball to get out of debt. Step number 5, save 3 to 6 months for an emergency fund. Once you're out of debt now, what you want to make sure is to build an emergency fund. Now, why is that important? As we said before, emergencies will come. If you lose your job, normally it takes between 3 to 6 months to get a new job. So if you want to make sure that if you lose your job, you don't end up now struggling financially because you don't have a source of income. But by savings, you can take from that money to live until you can get another job. So in the case of Susie, they're out of debt, they have $0 in debt, and they have an extra $1,400. Now they can put that towards an emergency fund. So how do you do the emergency fund? What you do is you look at all your expenses minus savings and retirement. You take that amount and you multiply it by 3 or by 6, and that becomes your emergency fund. Okay? If you want 3 months, every month you save until you get to that amount. In the case of Rob and Susie, if you take 556.90.36, you multiply it by 3, that's $17,000 they need to have, or $34,000 if they need 6 months. Now I know what you're thinking. That's a lot of money to sit somewhere. I understand. So what you do with that money is you put it in what's called a money market account. The money market accounts, there are a bunch of them now online. They'll give you 4 to 5% interest on them. You put your money in there, and you get 4 to 5% every year on it. So put that money on there, for in case you have an emergency, you don't have to worry if you lose your job. All right? So that's step number 5. Step number 6, now you're ready to start saving for retirement. All right? Save for retirement. Now, this is what Dave Ramsey recommends. When you're saving for retirement, first you need to decide how much money you'll need to retire. Do you think you need $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million? Decide what that is, how much you'll need. Then once you decide, you have to invest up to your company's match. As I told you earlier, never leave money on the table. If your job is giving you money, take it. That's probably the only thing they're going to give you. Because all they're going to do is take from you. If they're matching 5%, put 5%. If they're matching 3%, put 3%. If they put matching 2%, put at least that. But put at least what they match. And then invest also in a Roth IRA. Now, what's the difference between an IRA and a Roth IRA? A Roth IRA is money that you already paid the tax on. So when you retire, at the end, that money, you won't pay any tax on it. If you say $50,000, it's yours, no tax. If it's $100,000, $200,000, when you retire, all the money is yours with no tax. All right? So you can save, if you're less than 50 years old, you can save up to $6,000 per year. So part of saving for retirement, about 15% of your income after you're done with debt, 15% should go towards retirement at a minimum. All right? And the last thing is start as soon as possible. If you're young, right now, you have the element of time. Time is your best asset. It doesn't mean if you're older you can do it, but for the people who are younger, I wish I knew this when I was 15. I'd be a multimillionaire by now, right? But I didn't know. So for the kids and young people, if you have young kids, make sure you get them started early. Let me give you an example. Jen Smith is 24 years old. She invests $3,000 per year from age 24 to 34. At the age of 34, she stops. She says, I'm done with this investing thing. I'm not going to do it anymore. And then Ken Smith, who noticed that his sister was saving, he decides to start at the age of 35. He invests $3,000 a year from 35 to 65 for 30 years. She invests for 10, he invests for 30 years. In the end, she has $1.2 million, and he's only got $600,000. The element of time and compounding interest. So the sooner you can get started, the better. All right? You may not be 15 or 25 years now, but get started. If you're not saving for retirement, you need to be doing it now. All right? Make sense? Are you still with me? All right. Step number 7, protect your money with insurance. All right, now what is insurance? Insurance serves as an umbrella. When it's raining, you go outside, you put an umbrella, and what it does is it protects you. Insurance protects you. Your insurer protects you by transferring the risks from yourself to your insurer. For example, so you pay a premium, right? You pay the insurance company so that when something happens, something bad happens, you don't have to spend the money. Your insurer spends the money on your behalf. Does that make sense? Say again, you don't trust them? You don't trust the bankers? Well, yeah. Well, my experience has been a little better than yours, I guess, because I've had a few car accidents, and nobody scratched their heads. When I go to the doctors, I just present my card, and my insurance company pays. I'm not saying that it's the case for everybody, but that's been my experience. And God forbid, if I were to drop dead tomorrow, I want to make sure that my wife and my kids won't lose the house. So I get life insurance. And if I were to get into an accident and I can't work, I get disability insurance, guaranteed 60% income. And identity theft. If somebody steals your identity, takes your credit card, and run a huge bill, you don't want to be scratching your head. You need somebody else to come and fix that. So that would be my recommendation. Those are at least the 5 I recommend you have. Car, health, life, disability, and identity. All right? That protects you if something happens. But maybe the experience is not the same for everybody. All right? So make sure you buy insurance. It protects you. Number 8, save for your kids' college. Now, I know some people say, I'll never save for kids' college. I believe in doing that. Because when I was growing up, if my parents were able to save for me to go to college, then I would not struggle. Now, let me tell you something. If you don't have the money, it's okay. Does that make sense? The kids can get a job. It might take them 10, 15, 20 years to go through college, but they'll be fine. Don't co-sign for them. All right? But if you have the ability, you can do it, you should do it. Save for your kids' college. Now, there's some options on how to do that. There's a 529 plan. This is an education savings account that offers tax benefits. So when you put this money away, if the kids use that money to pay for school, they will not pay taxes on them. They only pay taxes if you use it for something other than education. All right? So I personally don't do it. Because if you decide later on that your kids doesn't want to go to college and you want to do something else with this money, you get a penalty. What I do is the second option, which is mutual funds. As soon as my son turned 3 years old, we decided we're going to start saving for him for college, and we put it in a mutual fund. So if he decides he doesn't want to go to college or want to do something else, it's my money. It's under my name. I can do what I want with it. All right? And when the child grows up, maybe they may get scholarships, and they want to use the money to start a business. They should be able to do that too. So that's the second option. Another option is a custodial account where you open the account for the child, but as soon as they become 18 or 25, depending on where you live, then they get to take over the money. And there's nothing you can do about it. So think about it. If you have kids, college age, and you want to save for college, these are some of the options. There are a bunch of others, but these are the more popular ones. All right? But it's encouraged, if you can do it, don't let your children start life in debt. Don't let them do it. Encourage them to study and get a scholarship, but sometimes the scholarship doesn't pay for everything. So try to put some money aside for them. Step 9, pay off the house early. Now, once you've done all these things, you start saving for college, now you can start saying, okay, I got this 30-year mortgage. I need to get freedom from it. So pay for it early. How can you pay early? Make extra payments. If you can do it, make extra payment. If you're one of those people who did not get a 15-year mortgage, you had a 30-year mortgage, if you can afford to, make extra payment. This is an example. Let's say your mortgage is $240,000 at a 7% interest for 30 years, which means your monthly payment is $1,597. If you pay this house in 30 years, you're going to pay $575,000. But if you just made one extra payment per quarter, one extra payment, which is $6,338 per year, you're going to save 32%. You'll save $184,000. Just one extra payment per quarter. So it pays, if you can do that, to pay your house early, just make extra payments. The other thing you can do is refinance to get either a lower rate or a lower term. Now, the banks are thieves. When you try to refinance, what they're going to do is give you another 30 years so you can get locked in with them. So, but you can be smart, right? Don't lock in for 30, lock in for 15. Refinance, because hopefully by the time you're doing this, you've paid some money before, your balance is a little lower. And if you can refinance with a shorter term, again, you're going to save some money, all right? This is an example. You can save $100,000 on the same example I gave you earlier. If you change from 7% for 30 years to 6.5% for 15 years, you save $200,000. All right? So, refinance with lower term. Put extra income. So commit extra money towards your house. For example, your tax returns. Put it in the house. If you get a raise, leave it as if you did not get a raise. Put it towards the house. Bonuses, profit sharing, put it towards the house until you pay it off. You also can downsize. If you got a big house, you don't need it, sell it, buy a smaller one, right? Or go into an apartment. It won't kill you, right? There's things you can do to make sure you reduce your... Now, I know, again, I'm all for home ownership, right? But you got to do it on the right terms and at the right time. There are people who own homes, they can't sleep in the house because they have to work 3 jobs just to make the payments. That doesn't make sense, right? If you can't afford the house, downsize. Buy something smaller. All right? And the last step, step number 10, build wealth and help other people. Now, this is what Dave Ramsey recommends. He recommends that if you're investing your money, avoid risky investments. There are people who want to get rich quick. That doesn't work. Wealth is built slowly over time. All right? Slow and steady wins the race. So no get-rich-quick schemes. Use a balanced portfolio. And I'll talk to you about what that is in a minute. Get involved in your own finances. Don't just give somebody your money and trust them to take care of it. You know how many NBA players make millions and hundreds of millions of dollars and they go broke? Because they trust somebody else to manage their money. Even if somebody's doing it, ask them questions. Every year at least, you should sit down and have a discussion with them. How's my money being invested? And do research. You can Google anything, almost anything. So get involved in your own finances. If you don't know how, learn, and don't invest in things you don't understand. Somebody comes to you, explains something that doesn't make sense. Nope, I'm not budging until I know what you're talking about. If I don't know what it is, I'm not putting my money in it. Now, this is what Dave Ramsey recommends. He recommends when you invest, you put your money in mutual funds, and he recommends 25% in large cap. So mutual funds essentially means a bunch of people come together and they put money together mutually to buy stocks. Usually there are like dozens of companies together. So that means is when the market goes up, those stocks go up, but not as fast as the market. Well, some of them actually do better than the market, but generally, you won't lose your money as fast because it's not 1 or 2 companies, it's like 40 or 50. For example, the S&P 500 is the 500 top companies in the world. So it goes up slowly, but also comes down slowly. All right? So he recommends 25% large caps. These are big companies, over $10 billion in revenue. So 25% of your investments should go into that. He also recommends 25% in medium caps. These are medium companies. So big companies would be like Google and Walmart and Microsoft and NVIDIA. Those are huge companies. You put 25% of your money in mutual funds that have those companies. And then the next 25 would be an average medium-sized company that's with revenues up to $10 billion. And then you put in small caps. That's companies that are a little bit more volatile. This would be things like, I'm sorry? Yeah, this would be like small companies. They're struggling, but they're more ambitious. The stock could today go up by $3,000, and tomorrow it drops by $3,000. But when you mix it up, some will go up, some will go down, and you have a mixed portfolio. The last one is international. Don't put all your money in the United States. Put some in some other companies as well. So this is what Dave Ramsey recommends. It's a mixed portfolio. Again, if you don't understand this, just Google mutual funds. What are mutual funds? And you learn about them. All right? So, and then once you start doing this, now you get to a point later in life when you can now start to live and not worry when you go out to buy something, whether or not you're going to be able to rob from Peter to pay Paul. Okay? If you still have Peter to rob. Exactly right. You know, and this is going to take time. Keep pushing and keep doing this, and eventually you'll start to get to the point where you're coming closer and closer to your retirement age, to your retirement goals. But you need to start as early as you can. So this is what Rachel Cruz of Ramsey Solutions says about giving. It says, giving is the most fun you'll ever have with money. When you get to a point now where you're not struggling financially, you can start to give. You can start to help people around you. And that's a biblical principle. Matthew 10:8, heal the sick, cleanse the leper, raise the dead, cast out demon, freely you have received, freely give. God expects us to give. Acts 20:35 says, I'll just read the last sentence, it's more blessed to give than to receive. God wants us to be givers. When you see somebody who's poor around you, it's not just a favor you do them, you have a duty, an obligation to help them. But you can't if you're broke. Right? You can't do it if you're broke. All right. So, a few ways to give back. Increase your church giving. Once you get to a point where you're financially comfortable, you can switch from 10% and 5 to 10 and 15. 15%. And if you don't want to give all the 15 to the church, you can give to other causes to help people around you. You can give to a dear cause, for example, a charitable organization or a foundation. You can start a foundation and help other people in need. You can set aside a percentage of your salary if you have some family members or friends or you know who are in need. You can also use that as a way to give. You can give gifts like Oprah did. She figured something out. She gave cars. Now, you probably can't give cars, but there's got to be somebody you know who's struggling and you can help. So these are the 10 steps. Step 1, return your tithe and offering. That's critical. That's the most important step. Then, next thing you do, make sure you have a small emergency fund so that your financial progress is not derailed because you have an emergency. Create a budget. Make sure all your incomes, all your expenses, every single dollar you spend every day is on the budget. If it's not on the budget, it doesn't get spent. And when the budget, if you're married, please do it with your spouse. It helps to balance things out. All right? And you'll find out one person is going to be the disciplinarian and one person is going to be loosey-goosey. Figure out a way to make it work. But the important thing is everybody respects the budget. If it's not in the budget, we ain't spending it until we can figure out where the money is coming from. All right? Step 4, pay off your debts. Debt snowball. Start with the smallest thing, pay it first, free up that money, pay the next thing until you pay everything else. Typically, that takes you about 3 years, except for the house, of course. To pay all your debt, the average person, about 3 years. Imagine if you can free all that money in just about 3 years. All right? Number 5, once you're out of debt, now set aside 3 to 6 month emergency in case you lose your job so you can keep living until you get another job. Then invest into your retirement. The recommended percentage is 15%, but make sure whatever your employer matches, you put at least that in your 401k. Then protect your money with insurances, health insurance, car insurance, disability insurance, identity theft, so that you can protect yourself and transfer the risk if something happens to you. And then, of course, if you have children, college age, save for college for them, then pay off the house, and then build wealth and give. Any questions? So, yeah, yeah, that's a good question. So steps 1 to 5 you should do in sequence. 1 to 5 you should do in sequence. Because if you try to do other things before you pay off your debts, it's going to derail the plan. But once you get to step 6, you can do a little at a time because first you need to save for college, you need to save for retirement, you can do them. But the first 5 steps you should follow one at a time. But after that, it depends on where you are and what you're dealing with in your financial life. Yeah, individually 1 to 5, yeah. Create the budget first, then tackle pay off the debt, then do emergency fund. Once you have the emergency fund, then you can look at where you are and whatever you're, based on your plan, you can take 2 at a time, 3 at a time, 1 at a time after that. All right? It's a great question. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry? About student loans. I had student loans because I didn't know any better. If you can, I would recommend not taking them. Go to community college, take 2 classes. Don't get into debt if you can avoid it. I do not recommend student loans. I did it. Everyone in my family did it. But if I had to do it over again, I would not take student loans. I'm sorry? If you already have it, yeah, debt snowball. Debt snowball. Pay all your debts. When you get, after you pay all the other debts, tackle the student loan and pay it off. I know people who've done this in 2 to 3 years. Pay off $60,000 in student loan. They just go crazy. We're going to eat only lettuce and vegetables, but we're going to pay this off. You know? That's what you got to do. But it's the same principle. You pay the smallest ones. After student loan, then you tackle the house. Other questions? How do you get to the 1 payment extra per quarter? All right, so again, it depends on your financial situation. But Susie and Rob, okay. So for Susie and Rob, if you recall, after they paid for everything off, right, they freed up some cash. So what you can do is, if let's say they had an extra $1,400 a month, and the house payment was, I think, about $1,500. So take one of them, and every quarter, it's once per quarter, once every 3 months, you send in an extra payment. All right, now that requires discipline. Most people won't do that, which is why you're encouraged to instead refinance and make it 15 years.
The other point is, since they have the extra $1,300, they actually have that every month.
Correct.
What would you recommend they do with that extra $1,300?
So that would be first putting it towards the 6 to 12 month emergency fund. Okay, so once that's built, then that income, they can now put more in retirement. Go up to 15% in retirement. Or pay the house off.
That's what I'm thinking. I was thinking if they would take that $1,300 every month.
You can do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Take the house down separately.
Yeah. Pay the house off. Once you get up to step 5, everything else is based on your goal. What makes sense for you in your financial situation, that's what you do.
Why is it important to have disability insurance in addition to life insurance or
Yeah.
death benefit?
That's a great question. By the way, death benefit insurance is a scam. You're dead. If you have life insurance, why do you need death benefit insurance? But the disability is you get hurt and you can't work. You're still alive, you don't get life insurance, right? And so disability, what's going to do is, whatever your income, you get 60% of that. So if you are making $100,000, you get hurt, you can't work anymore, they owe you $60,000 every year until you die, even when you can't work. That's why it's important. It's not the same as the health insurance and the life insurance. Yeah. That's why that's important to have. You're welcome. And usually your job pays for that. If you have, usually if you have a decent company, most of the time for free, they give you 60% of your salary. Sure.
For that person who is self-employed or independently employed, what are your recommendations?
Yeah, that becomes more of a challenge because then you have to go out and pay and buy these things, and it's going to be very expensive. All right? So, but you have to do it. You have to now figure out how much risk you want to take. That's what it comes down to. If what you're doing is something you can do with your mind, you may take the risk, okay, well, if I get into a car accident, I can't work anymore, my mind is still sharp, I can do it. You have to make that risk. But the recommendation is to protect yourself and your family from the risks when something happened by transferring that risk to the insurance company.
You borrow from your pension.
Yeah, he asks, should you borrow from your pension to buy a house? No. No, you should not do that. When you do that, there's a huge penalty. There's a huge penalty from it. It's not worth doing. Avoid it at all costs. Don't do it even to pay off your debts. Avoid borrowing. There are people who will recommend when you are trying to get out of debt that you even stop contributing for that. I don't make those recommendations, but some people would recommend you do that so you can concentrate your money on paying off your debts. Then when you're done, you go up to 15%. But do not borrow from it because you're borrowing money. The thing is not borrow, right? Avoid at all costs.
So then what happens if the person has already done that?
If it has already done that, then it becomes on your debt snowball. Put it on your debt snowball and pay it off. You know? The goal is to get out of debt so that you can free up your money and use that money to save for the future. That's the ultimate goal. Because once you get to that 6, 7 steps, now you can start to invest, right? You can start to learn about investment where you buy mutual funds, which typically gives you about 10% per year. And over time, that money keeps growing, right? So you want to avoid debt at all costs so your money can be free to work for you. That's the principle. That's what the wealthy people do. Wealthy people are the cheapest on the planet. The more money they have, the cheaper they are. They go into the restaurant, they won't carry their doggy bag out. They got somebody else to carry it for them because they want to save their money. But we who are not wealthy, we just frivolous. We want to hear you. We want to hear you.
And, you know, the Lord give you 70 by reason of strength. You live longer, right? And sometimes people invest late in their life. And you said don't borrow from your pension, but I know people who maybe they don't borrow, but as they retire, they die. But they invest their money, they borrow from it. They didn't live to enjoy it, but they still invested. You see my point?
Yeah, but that's the exception, not the rule, right? It's not typically. I also know people who borrow from the pension and they go bankrupt because they struggle to pay it back. It's not a good practice. Borrowing, the Bible says the lender, the borrower is slave of the lender. It changes the moment you borrow, you become a slave. Avoid it. Debt is dumb. Think about that. Just internalize that. Debt is dumb. Don't borrow money. Now, I know people are struggling. You need to buy a house. It's okay. You borrow money. That's the only thing you're encouraged to borrow money for. Everything else, use cash.
And if it's not on sale, we'll buy it.
Yes. Well, I mean, credit union, yeah. I mean, it's like a bank, right? Yeah, I mean, I've been involved with credit unions to save money. If they're giving you a nice enough percentage, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. You can use them as a bank. a lot of times credit unions don't have the fees that bank have. They're a little easier to deal with. So, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Treat them as the bank, but keep in mind, banks want your money for themselves. If you're going to take a loan from them, when you put their money, they'll give you 0.15%. Maybe credit union will give you 0.25 or 1.25. But when you try to borrow, they charge you 10%, 15%, 25%. Keep that in mind. All right? They're not your friends. They want your money. Any other questions? Yes. To not have to use just cash. Yeah. 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 So that's a myth. Thank you, brother. I was looking for the right word. My mother, never had a credit card, ever. She did everything on cash, and when it was time to buy a house, she was able to buy the house. Now, her interests were a little higher, but then she also put down a bigger amount, and she was fine. The credit score is a debt score. That's what it is. It's a debt score. It's the way to entrap you. Now, if you're paying everything on cash, you need to buy a house. If you have a good job, you'll be able to buy a house. It's a myth. Yes? Yeah. So again, when you buy something on credit, the bank is not your friend. It's in the business of taking your money. So when you buy something on credit and you pay slowly, every month you pay a little extra. If you could buy something for $3,000 and you pay the minimum payment, they'll never bother you. Because then $3,000, by the time you're done, you pay back about $10,000. Don't do it. Buy in cash. Trust me. Because then you keep your own interest. What you're going to pay for interest, you can use that money for yourself. Do not ever buy anything on credit unless it's a house. Everything you want to buy, pay cash. Even the car. Buy what you can afford. Any other questions?
Observation. Where are we from? We build our house from scratch.
I'm sorry?
Where we are from.
Yeah.
We don't buy house. We don't use loans. We don't have loans.
Yeah.
We call our friends, we cook the food, and they come and they help us. During the week, there's some person with a skill.
Yeah.
They say, well, this is how this is to be done.
Well, the system is a little different here. No, nobody's going to help you. But
I understand. The principle is to make sure that if you can't pay for it, don't buy it.
don't buy it. Yeah. Don't buy it. Listen, I know this sounds impossible, but it's not. It's not impossible. You can actually do this. You have to look for ways to minimize. Like we're using a culture of consumerism. People just want to buy stuff that they don't need. It's like they work for Amazon. Every day boxes are coming in and it makes no sense. Buy what you need. Yes, sir. That's a good one. Well, yeah, I think it depends on your situation because it's good to own your home. Again, it's a way of giving a stable inheritance to your children because if you look at the real estate market, it keeps going up. I remember my mom bought a house for $150,000. In 2 years, it went up to $200,000. So it's good if you can make that investment. But, again, if you find out that it's beyond your reach and it's better to rent, then by all means. Yeah. Yeah, because when you rent, you just really, all you're doing is throwing money away, right? You're giving it to somebody. It's not yours. But again, if you can't afford a house, it's worse. Yeah, yeah.
Some people that says, I see on some houses it say rent to own. Rent.
Rent to own. Yeah, so I'm not really familiar with that situation. I don't know how that works. I think it depends on the arrangement, on how they want to do it. Make sure that you're not being entrapped. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but I'd be very careful. If I'm going to do something, I want it legitimate, on paper, the laws to protect me. Yeah. But so I'd be careful with that. Any other questions? Yes. Do I recommend a company for life insurance?
Final expenses.
What's that mean? What's final expense? Death expensive? Sorry. I cannot hear. I'm sorry. Is there a mic back there?
The question was, do you have a company in mind that handles final expenses, which is, of course, life insurance, but deal with funeral expenses, but cater to people that have medical issues? Because I know that there are a lot of companies that um, they require your physical, like that, like they'll ask you for your doctor's information, and based on your health information, they may deny you. So do you have a company in mind that deals with final expenses that you know that will pay out if someone dies and pay whatever medical bills that they have?
I don't. I'm not even familiar, to be honest with you, with that process. It sounds like life insurance, but yeah, life insurance. Yeah, there are a lot of companies you can go to. Yeah. I mean, I don't sponsor anybody. You know, but you can easily look online and find some good companies for life insurances. But what I would recommend when you take life insurances that you take term life insurance and not whole life. Okay? Why? Yes. Why? It's a good question. So, again, the whole idea is you following these steps so you can build yourself a future. When you take term life insurance, it protects you for a term while you fix your finances, and it's cheaper, right? It's a fraction of what you would pay for a whole life. All right? So the recommendation is not to take whole life, but to take term. There's someone in the back. Thank you, man. Hopefully, hopefully by then you fix your finances and you don't have to worry. Your family doesn't have to worry about your income anymore. Yeah, you can too. But the whole point is you protect yourself while you fix your finances, so that when the time comes, let's say you do it at the age of 40 for 30 years, you use the 30 years to fix your finances and invest. So when the time comes, that money you were protecting, you actually have that saved. That's the whole idea. My sister in the back. Yeah, it's a great question. Listen, I can only use my mom as an example. My mom had no credit. She bought a house. My mom managed her finance really nicely. When there was time, she went into the bank. They gave her a loan. She had a job. She proved she could make the payments. Now, again, they may have increased her interest rate a little bit, but she managed to buy the house. I'm not a financial expert. I can't tell you, but I can tell you that it's a myth. Credit, it's a debt score. It's the more you keep the debt for longer, the higher credit score. I wonder why. It's a myth. All right, is that it, Pastor?
I know you will come again. Let's give him a hand of You see, sometimes we have to spend time like this so that we can ask questions, especially those who have been through it. And one interest that I gained from this lecture is the mutual investment. Look for one. Put something aside. Really? You don't have to put much, but I have to. Yeah, every month it comes directly from what I get.
Yeah.
It go in there.
Go in there, that's right.
And I will never be squeezed.
Eternal God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this knowledge that you have passed on to us. We pray that we will take it seriously. Help us, dear Father, the Bible said you must work and you must give. Help us to find ourselves in a position to give something away. Bless us. We thank thee for this young man who came in. He preached a wonderful sermon, and he gave us this afternoon some very good financial instruction. We pray that your blessings be with him, with his family, and grant, dear Father, that you may use him, dear Father, while it is still use him to help other people. Grant us your peace, we ask you. All of these mercies in the wonderful name of Jesus. Amen. Don't forget to come back by 4 o'clock for youth. The youth.